We all struggle to have faith in Hashem. That's important. Emunah is the key word today, especially the Emunah Shalema that we need to have when we're looking for our shidduch and it's taking time. Although Mashiach's arrival is also part of our Emunah test, we have to wait patiently. And so much of life is about waiting, especially when you wait for your soulmate. The daughters of Tzlov Machla, Noah, Chagla, Milka, and Tirza. There were 5 strong women who would not do well, to say the least, if they had been set up for shidduch interviews today. Let's examine why. Imagine this scene. 5 older singles sit before a matchmaker, as many of you have. So let's start with the basics. The matchmaker says, "How old are you?" as she looks at these 5 women. The youngest, her hair already turning gray, says, "My dear young lady, I'm 40 years old." The oldest of the 5 sisters says, "I'm 60 years old." Well, we're not off to a great start, are we? When the shadchan then inquires about their yichus or their pedigree, all they can say is, "Our father died in the desert, unfortunately a sinner. He was the first Mechalel Shabbos. He was the person who the Torah tells us, who describes, was collecting wood in the desert, and he was put to death." To add salt to the wound, because all 5 of his daughters were female and unmarried, all his children rather, all his offspring were female and unmarried, his daughters had no plot in the land. Obviously, they were going into Israel with the idea, all the Jews were going into Israel with the idea that they were going to get an ancestral portion in the land of Israel. But here, his daughters were seemingly not involved in the inheritance. Plus, they had a reputation for being very meticulous with every mitzvah and choron, which means that they were very exacting in the way they observed Judaism. Something that was not most appreciated by men, especially in those days when you remember some of the sins that the men were involved in, such as complaining, such as being involved in the golden calf, etc. If we look at the circumstances of these 5 women, what chance did they ever have of finding their soulmates? Still, the daughters of Tzlov did not compromise. Let's learn some lessons, ladies and gentlemen, from these outstanding people. You know, the Torah tells us, Maaseh Avot Siman Lebanim, that what happened to our forefathers and foremothers, which can refer to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, and Rachel, not only them, but many of the great personalities of the time 2,000-3,000 years ago. And these are the 5 women that we want to discuss today. Let's learn from their experiences. These daughters did not compromise when it came to finding their soulmates. They waited patiently with the utmost faith in Hashem or Emunah for husbands who would share their unwavering appreciation for the Torah that they loved and they lived for. And they truly believed that they would merit building wonderful homes one day. So even though the youngest was 40 years old and the oldest was 60 years old, they didn't give up hope, not at all. The attitude of these girls was or young women, was yes, we can, and yes, we shall be successful. Although their circumstances seemed dire and not too realistic, they were filled with positivity. Again, that's a critical point that we want to take away. That's a great takeaway from these women. 5 daughters, their father was put to death in the desert, yes, but they never unwavered in their desire or expectation or their dreams that they would get married. And the Medrash tells us, and the belief was what kept them going. Isn't that what is true for us today? What keeps us going as Orthodox Jews, if we look at what's going on in the world, and the political unrest, and the crises that are unfolding in our lives? Because they always said, Tov Hashem lakol. This is what these 5 girls said. Hashem is good to all. Hashem is good for everything. They merited bearing children until the age of 130. Even though they got started late in life, but they caught up awfully quickly. Another virtue that we want to talk about is that these daughters were heroic in other ways. They would often examine their actions and discuss, how can we get better? How can we improve while they were single? They didn't sit around and remain static and allow themselves to deteriorate. They were always on the upward climb. Another key area that we want to speak about when it comes to the daughters of Tzlov was their unwavering fear of God, even in times when they could have just given up. When they held on tightly to the Torah principles and their tznius, their modesty, they didn't feel that they were losing out. Unfazed by those who suggest that perhaps take it a little easy would bring you a salvation, these daughters did not give up.